To the traveler of the interior wilderness, welcome. You have arrived at the edge of the sacred, where the salt scribe circle delineates the conscious from the vast unconscious. Here, the abyss returns our gaze. We are called to the precipice, to the fringe of our own understanding, to discover the immutable core of self. By earth and by ether, you are grounded and held. In this shadowed space, the archetypal child emerges, its voice finally unbound. We embrace the sacred wound, for in its depths, our ascent begins. From the prima materia of the soul, I claim the power that is mine. Welcome and greetings if this is not your first time with us, but if it is, welcome. Happy that you found us here at the Salt Circle. In our previous work, we undertook a form of sacred architecture. We established an inner sanctum, and upon that consecrated ground, we forged the psyche's altar, the seat of our sovereign witness. We have built a temple, a focal point for our awareness. But many of us, when we approach this silent, waiting altar, feel a profound absence. The power we were told resides within us, that feels dormant, maybe, inaccessible, or non existent. Today, we address that silence. We investigate the force that was meant to occupy this sacred space. Today, we begin the work of understanding and reclaiming the primal self. So, welcome to episode 4. This is a powerful and crucial topic, the natural and necessary escalation of the shadow work we've laid out. After building the altar and learning to face the world, we must now summon the power that will inhibit that altar and wield its sovereignty. A new definition: the impulse towards self-actualization. Let's be precise. When I say primal self, I am not referring to a wild animal or a chaotic inner beast. That is a simplistic, often fearful interpretation. From a humanistic, psychological perspective, the primal self is the innate, base level, cellular, intuitive intelligence that, drives you towards self-actualization. It is your most authentic core self, containing your true needs, values, and boundaries and potential. It is the part of you that instinctively knows what is right for you, what is harmful to you, and what you need to thrive, entirely separate from what you were taught you should be. From a Jungian view, it is the raw, undifferentiated energy of the self archetype before the ego and the persona were forced to build their rigid defenses. It's not something to be feared. It is a very source code for your potential wholeness. So, the great severance, or the psychological theory or situation of self-exile. So, the conditions of worth, a primal betrayal. So if this primal self, this innate drive towards self-actualization, if that's our birthright, where did it go? Its disappearance is rarely the result of a single cataclysmic event. It is a systematic exile carried out through 1,000 micro betrayals, both from the world and consequently ourselves. The psychologist Carl Rogers identified the core mechanism of this exile. He called it conditions of worth. We are all born with a fundamental need for what he termed unconditional positive regard, love, acceptance, and belonging simply for existing. But for most of us, that is not the reality we encounter. Instead, we are presented with a brutal soul level bargain. I will love you if you're quiet, if you're compliant, if you don't have inconvenient needs, if you don't speak up, if you don't make me uncomfortable. These conditions are not just handed down by, our parents or our forebearers. They are the suffocating smog of our cultural climate. They are the unspoken rules of our communities, of our schools, of, our religions. When a community tells, a queer youth that their love is shameful and must be hidden, that is a condition of worth. When a family tells a creative, eccentric child that they're being weird and they need to act normal in order to be accepted, that is a condition of worth. When a society dictates how you must dress, what you must believe, what your body must look like, these are all conditions of worth. It may sound like a cliche movie trope in a Hallmark teen movie or something, but this is a real grinding and universally accepted process by which a culture forces its members into conformity. And here we face a primal, impossible choice. The developing self knows that to go against these conditions means facing isolation. It means becoming the black sheep. And to our ancient tribal nervous system, isolation is pretty synonymous with death. So we choose attachment over authenticity. And it's tragic, but brilliant way to survive. We learn that it's easier, it's safer to hide parts of ourselves and metabolize the shame of being different. And we don't want to stand alone, and we will hide our truth. We amputate parts of our primal self so that we are not deemed unacceptable. We exile our righteous anger, our inconvenient needs, our too muchness, our quiet truths. We cut off these vital pieces of ourselves in exchange for a conditional, precarious form of belonging. Now, layer this universal pressure on top of a childhood characterized by active dysfunction, addiction, abuse, or neglect. Imagine trying to navigate the already treacherous waters of social conditioning while your home is effectively a war zone. The task becomes not just about fitting in, but about basic survival. You are not just managing external expectations, you are managing the volatile moods of an addict, the unpredictable rage of an abuser, the profound emptiness of neglect. The energy required to maintain a sense of self, a basic compass of reality, while being bombarded with these internal and external forces is astronomical. So, this creates a profound schism within the psyche, a state of incongruence. This is the painful, exhausting gap between the authentic primal self, hidden in the shadow, and the carefully constructed persona you must perform for the world simply to endure the day. The longer you live in this state, the more calcified the persona becomes. You pretend for so long that you forget you're pretending. You hide parts of yourself so deep for so many years that you lose the map back to them. You no longer recognize your own reflection. You become so alienated from your own core that the very idea of being true to yourself without anxiously managing the perception of others feels like an impossible, terrifying fantasy. And the abusive echoes that we feel in our adult lives, the chronic anxiety, the depression, the sense of profound alienation, are symptoms of this incongruence. They are not signs that you are broken. They are the desperate, muffled signals from your exiled primal self that are still trying to call you, that are still trying to go back home. So, we're going to practice dialogue with our exiled, fragmented pieces of the self. The work of reclamation, then, is not a chaotic summoning, but something far more profound and elemental. It is a deliberate practice of coming home to the self. It is the art of closing the painful gap of incongruence by allowing the exiled parts of our emotional truth to return, to reintegrate, to become part of our vastness once more. To do this, I want you to imagine your inner sanctum, the one we have consecrated. At its very center, see your psyche's altar standing on the shore of a vast, deep ocean. That ocean is the Jungian concept of the self. The entirety of your psyche, consciousness and unconsciousness, a force with immense, almost unfathomable capacity for integration. For years, many of us have lived in a state of psychic drought, terrified of the weather of our own souls. We see the storm clouds of grief or rage gathering on the horizon, and we engage what psychologists call experimental avoidance. We build dams of denial. We run for cover of distraction. We tense our bodies against the first drops of rain. We've been taught that our emotions are destructive floods that will overwhelm us and drown the vulnerable parts of ourselves, like the wounded fae. This is a survival lesson learned in childhood where, perhaps we were too small to handle the storm and no one provided us with shelter. But at the altar, you have built changes. You have created an entire landscape. Remember that. The practice begins here at the altar on the shoreline with a radical shift in principle. The work is not to fight the rain, the work is to become the ocean. And this is a lesson in radical self acceptance, a core tenet of therapeutic modalities like dialectical behavioral therapy, who, the pioneering researcher, I forget her name, I know it's a woman, she demonstrated that transformation only begins after we relinquish the fight with what is, right? So when you feel a torrential downpour of long suppressed emotion, when you feel that beginning, don't brace for impact. Consciously, deliberately soften. Approach your altar. Watch the storm come in. This is the alchemy. You allow the rain of your sorrow, the hail of your fear, the lightning of your rage to fall from the sky directly into the surface of the ocean of yourself. And then what you witness is going to be an incredible art. The rain doesn't struggle against the ocean, it simply dissolves into it, becomes one with it. A single drop of grief, which can feel agonizing and sharp when held in isolation or when you're struck with that first drop out of nowhere, it loses that individual torrenting power when it returns to the vastness of the whole. This is integration. As neuroscientific studies on affect labeling have shown, the simple act of naming the emotion, so saying, this is grief, this is rage, to label with effectiveness and thoughtfulness and mindfulness, that really calms the brain's alarm centers. It allows us to witness the storm without being capsized by it. So this brings us now to, the crucial visceral fear of, what about the wounded fae? What about our inner child that is in there that we're supposed to protect? This tender part of ourselves. How is that going to survive these storms, these seemingly drowning thoughts? Again, here, we must perform another profound shift in our understanding. The storm is not something that happens to the the inner child. The storm is the unexpressed truth of the inner child. The torrential downpour is the release of unshed tears. The violent electric rage is the articulation of its silence, righteous anger at injustices that this inner child was forced to pretend weren't happening. The harm, the drowning, was never in the storm itself. It was in the building of the dam, in the slow, suffocating pressure of a lifetime of an unexpressed reality. So when you finally allow this rain to fall, you are not drowning your wounded fae. You're honestly finally watering its world. You are nourishing the flora and the fauna of your inner sanctum, the ground where it roams without shame or judgment. You learn to trust the waters. You learn to trust the earth of your psyche to absorb what is needed because you understand that you are not a teacup that can be overfilled. You are the entire ocean. The acceptance of your deepest and most rapid emotions, that rushing river of truth in the canyon of your being, is what makes your inner world a lush, alive, and vibrantly, authentically your own world. You know what I mean? So, that being said, let's move on to, pragmatic practices. So, this is the art of wielding the storm. These are pragmatic disciplines for the returned sovereign. The sanctioning of the eruption or validating the too much. Your first practice is the most radical, right? You must give yourself unconditional permission to be too much. When you uncage a starved, tortured animal, it's not going to emerge with grace. It emerges with a guttural, desperate roar. Your reclaimed anger, your first real no, your initial attempts at taking up space, they're likely going to be pretty explosive, pretty clumsy, disproportionate. They're going to feel very rude or very selfish or intense or insane to others, and most terrifyingly to yourself. You must understand this is a psychological law of physics. This eruption is the equal and opposite reaction to a lifetime of systematic oppression. It is the built up pressure of every time you are unable to speak, to defend yourself, to honor your own truth or even reality. You must, with fierce compassion, refuse to feel guilt or shame for this initial overreaction. The shame is not yours. It belongs to the system that necessitated the suppression in the first place. Your overreaction is simply the sound of a debt being paid. Sanction it. Allow it. It is a temporary but absolutely necessary phase of recalibration. The alchemical distillation from raw emotion to potent truth. Once you have allowed the eruption without shame, the next discipline begins. This is the art of distillation. It is the difference between a wildfire and a blacksmith's forge. Both are fire, but one is chaos and the other is directed power. You bring the raw, explosive emotion, the wildfire of your rage, the intensity of your frustration, bring that to the psyche's altar. At the altar, your sovereign witness does not extinguish the fire. It asks, with clinical precision, what is the core, unvarnished truth at the heart of this fire? You begin to distill the raw emotion down to its essential message. The wildfire of, I hate you, how could you do this, is distilled in the forge of your awareness down to the cold, hard steel of its truth. You crossed the line, and that's not acceptable. The torrent of frustration is distilled down to, my needs aren't being met, and the situation is no longer tolerable. But more importantly, I am not defending my needs, and that's why I'm so angry. This practice transforms the chaotic energy of raw emotion into the focused, potent energy of sovereign truth. The calibration of expression. Choose your weapon. Ding, 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 ding. Little video game graphic should pop up. One day I'll get good at that. But anyway, so this is the final practice um, of the art of tactile expression. Now that you've distilled this raw emotion into a potent truth, you have to consciously decide how you're going to wield it, right? You have an entire arsenal at your disposal, and you're just learning to trigger discipline. You may feel the volcanic rage, but have distilled its truth at your altar, and you can now choose your expression. Do you need to be, the blunt force of a warhammer? Yell at someone, get in their face and tell them it's not acceptable what they're doing? Or do you need the clean, sharp cut of a scalpel and just get up and walk away without saying a word? This is the balance. You honor the raw, explosive energy within you. You validate its existence and its message completely, but you consciously choose how to manifest that energy into the world. You are no longer reacting from a wounded place. You are practicing from your altar. This is the ultimate expression of sovereignty, not the absence of intense emotion, but the masterful, controlled, and tactile command of it. So, next is a little bit more shadow work just because, why not? The discipline of sovereign order. When you summon this primal power, it returns as raw fire. The ego, in its terror, will try to do one of two things: either shove it back into the darkness or let it rage uncontrollably, attempting to control the external world to soothe the internal chaos. This is the path of a control freak, of a tyrant. But our work is not to control, our work is about order. Order is different. Control is a frantic reaction to fear. Order is the result of sacred discipline. Order is the state you achieve when you have done the internal work, when you have surveyed your inner landscape, when you've checked on your inner fae, when you've given yourself such profound validation that you no longer need the world to bend to your will. Order is the masterful tending to your inner flame so that it provides warmth and light without burning down the whole sanctuary. This is why I need a gong. The following are not simple affirmations. They are decrees for discernment. These are incantations you can bring to your psyche's altar in the heat of the moment when you're feeling this volcanic urge to unleash your divine, ungovernable energy. And they're also questions that will help you distinguish between the chaotic impulse to control and the sovereign choice to act with order. So here are the decrees for the tended flame at our altar. So if you're confronted with disrespect or a boundary violation, you can write this down. I tape these things to my door and I read them whenever. Trust me, they actually help. This fire I feel is the sacred heat of truth. I will honor its presence. Now is its purpose to burn indiscriminately with rage of an old wound, or is it to be focused like a blacksmith's forge to cleanly sever what is unacceptable and to temper the steel of my own resolve? I will not dishonor the sacred anger with chaotic cruelty. I will wield it with the tactical precision of a sovereign protecting her realm. You can say this for when you're overwhelmed by the need to correct or prove someone wrong. Is this urge an attempt to control their mind or a need to honor my own? My inner knowing is the final authority and requires no external validation. I release the need to win their agreement, and instead I will stand in the unshakable order of my own perspective. My truth does not require their surrender. If you ever come across a situation where you feel the urge to act with brutal honesty or to be aggressive, you can say this decree: I will not confuse the volume of my voice with the value of my truth. Have I done the work? Have I checked in with my inner sanctum? Is this expression coming from the integrated self at the altar or from the explosive pain of an unwitnessed wound? I give myself permission to take up my space, but I will do so with the weight of my presence, not the blunt force of my pain. If you come across a situation where you overreact and then you come away from it feeling very ashamed, here is another decree. I will not be ashamed of the force with which my power returns. This eruption is a necessary recalibration, not a character flaw. I will now survey the landscape of this aftermath. What boundary was this fire trying to protect? What truth was this explosion trying to reveal? I will honor the message, integrate the wisdom, and then consciously choose how to refine my tactics for next time. My missteps are not failures, they're just data for my mastery. The journey of summoning the primal self is the journey towards congruence, the courageous, lifelong process of closing the gap between who you truly are and how you live your life. Every time you validate an authentic impulse at your altar, you reclaim a piece of yourself from exile. As we close our circle, go forth with the intention of listening. Listen for the quiet, authentic impulses beneath the noise of your conditioning. When you feel the discomfort of incongruence, know that this is not a sign of you being broken, but a call from your inner, truthful, primal self, inviting you to the altar. And may you have the courage to answer. We have reached the end of our circle for today. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to stand at the precipice of your own inner world and call forth what has been exiled. The great work of turning our scars into sovereignty is relentless, lifelong alchemy, and we will continue it together next week in the next chapter of our summer series. Until then, may you walk with the unflinching clarity of the witness and the undeniable fire of your reclaimed self. May you honor the ground you have taken and never surrender it again. Until next time, I'm your guide here at the Salt Circle. Be well, be sovereign, and blessed be.